28th, 1986 in Rockford, Illinois, and we're talking to Gertrude Florence Vad Knez and my mom. This is Jim Knez talking, and my mom's just going to talk a little bit about her life and growing up and what she remembers about her parents and grandparents. And this is just kind of a little bit of an oral history of the Knez and Vad family, probably mainly of the Vad side of the family. And I guess we'll just start off by asking Mom, really, what's the first thing she remembers about growing up? And you did grow up on a dairy farm initially, did you not?
That's right. Well, I was born July 24th, 1907. And I do remember a few things before the Easter Sunday tornado, year of 1913. I can remember as a little girl, when Dad had this dairy farm, he had a hired hand, and every time we'd go in the barn, when he was milking the cows, he'd shoot milk at us. That's the one thing that we didn't care too much about.
Yeah.
And I can remember before it was time for me to start kindergarten, my sister Alice took me one day to visit. I can remember that definitely. And
can I interrupt you? Just
certainly.
Were you born at home, or were you born in a hospital, or what?
No, all of us children were born at home.
I see.
And we were all born in the house that was destroyed by the 1913 tornado.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of things I can remember, but mostly after the tornado. And I remembered that particular Sunday, Dad had colored a lot of the Easter eggs for us, and my sister Grace was down playing with the rest of us children, and the sky started to get real kind of greenish color, and everything got so still that Dad started saying, we're going to have really a storm out of this. And it wasn't long until the clouds started to appear in that, and my sister Grace lived with my grandmother, and he told her that she better go home because we were going to have a bad storm. So it became very dark, and we all congregated in the kitchen, and my sister Alice and my two, let's see, I think Otto was born by that time, 1912. Yes, he was just a baby. And my brother Bus and myself were playing jacks on the kitchen floor, and Mother was sitting in the corner churning butter. And Dad had been outside watching the storm, and he'd come in, and he had just come in the door, and Mother heard this noise, and she had been in a kind of a small tornado once before, so she knew this sound, and she said, "Oh, Frank," she said, "it's a tornado." And they both jumped up and herded us kids in between the two of them. And Mother threw her Mother Hubbard apron over our heads, and they locked their arms around each other, and we stood there.
Right in the kitchen.
Right in the kitchen, in the direction that the tornado came from. So there we stood, and it took our house off its foundation and put it in our neighbor's yard. But by the grace of God, none of us even got a scratch.
Were you in the house? I mean, did the floor of the house stay on where it was at, or did you go with the house into the neighbor's yard?
No, we went right with the house. We just sailed right into the next neighbor's yard. Had the tornado taken a different direction, the trap door on our in our kitchen that went down into the basement flew right out the window, and if it had come our direction, I'm sure somebody would have been killed by that.
Yeah.
And luckily, too, that we didn't go down the basement, because the basement it was just a pile of debris down there. Well, after it had passed, we went outside, and it had started to get real cold and snowed, and all the Easter eggs that Dad had colored for us children, they were just blown all over the yard. And Dad's milk cans and that we found, several blocks blown away. The hired man had been milking the cows about that time, and he was sitting outside the barn on a bale of hay in a dazed condition. He didn't know what happened, and the roof of the barn just collapsed right down on the cattle. Well, after that, of course, Dad had sold out his business because so many of the buildings and everything were completely destroyed.
Did a lot of the cows get killed in that? Or?
No, I don't remember any of them getting killed, but evidently they must have been hurt or something. Yeah. Our neighbor that lived up a couple of blocks from us was killed, and my one of my good friends' sister was blown away. When they found her, she was dead. Mm-hmm. The storm had caused quite a few deaths. I think there was about 50 people that were killed in that tornado. So we couldn't live in our house, so Dad hitched up his sleigh because there was enough snow on the ground by that time, and put us in the sleigh, and we went over and stayed with his sister, who lived about, I'd say about a couple miles from us. And we stayed there until Dad could get the milk house into living quarters for us until our house, our new house was built. So that's one of the big highlights of my childhood. Plus the fact that after that tornado, Dad went and built a cyclone cellar right outside our kitchen door, and he really built it. I think we must have had about a 2-foot cement roof on that.
I remember that was a real bunker.
Yeah, had a roof and a big heavy trap door, and every time it stormed after that, why, he'd wake us up in the middle of the night and he'd say, well, I guess we better go down into the storm cellar. He says, we're going to have a bad storm out of this. And so we'd go down there and we'd sit around, and Dad would go outside and look to see what was happening, and then sometimes he'd say, well, we better not go back in the house yet, and then again he'd say, I think the worst is over. So we'd trot back upstairs and go to bed. Well, that went on for several years until I think in 1920 or 21 we missed another tornado by just a block, and that destroyed an awful lot of homes up in what they call the Dundee area, but there weren't many people killed in that one. And then Dolores and her family was in one not too many years ago.
Yeah, seems to run in the family.
Yeah, but that was really a bad one. It destroyed every house on their block. And excuse me.
Okay, I was just going to say, where did you go to grade school at?
Beals. That was down on South 48th Street near Center Street.
You used to walk to school?
We walked to school, snow or rain or whatever. Yeah. We didn't have any buses in those days for transportation. I can remember trudging to school with snow up to our hips, and then again in the summer it was beautiful because a lot of that area there was not developed. Now it is in the subdivisions, but you'd get to a crest of from Center Street until you got up to, I'd say 4 blocks from there. You came to a crest of the hill, and you look over those beautiful rolling hills, and they're filled with dandelions, and in some of the cutouts that were to be streets after it was developed, there would be wild roses on the banks, and in March there'd be a lot of kites sailing up in the sky, and that was a beautiful sight.
How far was that you used to go to school from your house?
It must have been over a mile. And then we could go the back way sometimes if we didn't want to go down South 48th, and then we'd always go through a beautiful little, well, it wasn't a park, but it was just nature, and had little hills and dales in it, and a beautiful spring that we used to stop and get a drink of water, and there'd be watercress in there, and we'd eat the watercress, and
Oh,
then go on and pick violets or Johnny jump ups and things like that. So I
did your
had,
mom used to pack you a lunch
Oh,
every day, all you
oh,
kids?
every day she'd pack lunches for us children, and
What was a lunch like then?
oh, she always had a good lunch. Her homemade bread for sure.
And what, peanut butter and jelly? Or
No peanut butter and jelly. Well, sometimes,
Yeah.
but we didn't go much for peanut butter in those days. It was some kind of a lunch meat, or
Mhm.
probably deviled egg sandwiches and things like that, and cookies and fruit. And so then that school is still in session, Beale School, and all of us kids graduated
My
from that
gosh.
school
Through 8th grade?
through 8th grade.
And then how about high school?
Well, then I went to Tech High. In fact, all of us kids, and I used to walk from Tech High, and that was way on the north side,
Uh-huh.
but I had a lot of cut-off paths. I could take the shorten the walk, and often in the nice spring weather and that, in the fall, I'd love to walk, and I'd walk way from there to our house, and then most of the time, so we had to take a streetcar.
Yeah. How far was that?
Oh gosh, that must have been about 15 miles or so.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
it didn't take me a long time, but I just loved to walk when I was young. And then from high school I went to Boyle's Business College. And then it wasn't long until,
Is that what, 1 or 2 years or a year? Or?
yeah, about that. And then I worked for the, let's see, what was it, Woodman Circle. It was an auxiliary of the Woodman of the World Fraternal Insurance Company. But I don't think that's no longer even in business. I think it's all those social fraternal insurance companies. They kept raising their rates all the time, and people couldn't. They drop out because they
Yeah.
just couldn't keep up with the premiums. So I was working at the Woodman Circle when I met John,
Mm-hmm.
and Alice was working for the Northwestern Bell Telephone Company as John's sister was, and they became acquainted. In this one particular time, I was going with a chap that belonged to the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and they were going to have a national convention in Omaha, and they needed girls to go dancing with. They were going to have a big dance out to Peony Park. So Helen had a bid for the same dance, and then Alice went and told Helen that, well, I had a bid too. And so it worked out that John's folks were going to drive us out to this Peony Park. It was out in the country, and that's the only way you could get out there was somebody driving you out there. And so the night of the dance, John's mother and father drove Helen and I out to this dance. But coming back, John's dad was there, and John, he just came home from Nebraska that day, and he played a lot of tennis then, and he had on white duck pants and a white shirt. He was real tan. Oh, when I seen him, I thought, I sure got to have a date with that guy. But I got home when they let me out, and I got in the house. I woke Alice up right away, and I said, oh, I met the most handsome guy. I said, I'd sure like to get a date with him sometime. And she went and told Helen that I would sure like to get a date with her brother. So in a couple of weeks, well, I did have a date with him, because there was a big house party that he invited me to, and a picnic out in the country. And from then on, why, it just seemed like we started dating. And that was during his junior year at Nebraska. And then he had one more year left, and he went with the telephone company in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, what year was that you met
That was in
John?
that I started dating him.
Yeah, well, what year did you meet Dad? About what year was
I
that?
met him in his junior year, and that must have been, see, we were married in 1931, so I must have met him in 1929,
Uh-huh.
because then he had one more year left at Nebraska, and that was 1930. Then he went with the telephone company, AT&T in Chicago, and he came back to Omaha when we became engaged, and that was in 1930, August of 1930, and then we were married February 10th, 1931. So we had there was a lot of his other college classmates that went with AT&T too to Chicago, just about that same time, and we all became good friends there, and some other AT&T people were involved, and we formed this bridge club, and for 9 years we had this bridge club going in the afternoon. We had a bridge luncheon, and then in the evenings we'd have a dinner bridge with the fellows. Well, that went on for some time until they started moving out into the suburbs, and then being transferred away. And we were, well, Tom was born in Chicago, and he was born at the Pacific Hospital September 20th, 1937.
Hey, Tom was born where in Chicago?
Yeah, in Chicago, the Chicago Lying-In Hospital. And
where did you live then?
we lived out on the south side, South Shore, what they call that.
Do you remember the address?
Well, the first one was on 75th and the last, let's see, what was that? I can't remember. I know when Tom was born, we were living a block away. We had been up on the 3rd floor, and that was going to be too much trekking up and down with the baby, so we moved over on 79th and Coles Avenue, and we used to walk down to the Lake Michigan and swim in that. That was great. Well, we were there up until from 1931 until 1939. We were transferred to Davenport, Iowa. We were there for just 1 year, and then John was transferred up to Minneapolis for the AT&T. We were there for 4 years, and that's where you were born. I think it was St. Mary's Hospital on forget when you're born.
Well, whatever.
No,
yeah.
no, wait, let me get this so you got it. July 6th, 1943.
Yeah.
And I was hoping you were going to be born on July 4th, but
Yeah.
it didn't happen. Well, we were there, as I said, you were born in 1943, and we were there until in 1944 we were transferred back to Chicago. And instead of being in Chicago proper, we found this house in Lake Bluff. But it was during the war years, and it was a hard thing to find anything to rent. So what happened, the man that was transferred up to Minneapolis took the house that we were renting, and we rented the house he was living in.
Oh, I see.
But John kept saying, oh, he said, we'd always lived in a nice house. He said, you're going to cry when you see this place. And I did cry because it was terrible. It had that stones pressed in stucco. And whenever it rained, all those stones would fall out. And you couldn't, there was no use trying to paint the outside because it would only happen over again. You'd have a lot of pot marks. the house inside was in an awful condition. So John went to work, and by the time that we left that place 10 years later, it looked like a nice colonial type home. His dad came up and they ripped the outside, that stucco off of there, and put 8-inch redwood siding on it, pushed the front entrance back, and over the pitched sun porch, put a flat roof with a railing around it and French doors in off of the bedroom, so you could just open them up and walk out there.
I can remember Dad doing a lot of that work. He did most of it himself.
Yes, most of it, and just restyled the front entrance hallway until it really looked really lovely. Well, I always told John, I said, the minute you put the last nail in the linoleum going down to the basement, we're going to be transferred. Sure enough, we were transferred down to Kansas City. Yeah. I remember one day I was vacuuming the bedroom rug and the phone rang, and John says, get ready. He says, we got to go down to pick out a house in Kansas City. And I think I took you with me. Well, anyway, we left Lake Bluff August 15th, 1955. Tom had just graduated from Lake Forest High, and he was enrolled to go to Northwestern University. He was accepted. So when we got down to Kansas City, we found out that they had an excellent dental college, one of the best ones in the country. So we thought, well, why send Tom away to school up Northwestern when he could stay at home and go to school here? So he graduated from dental college, and you went to school down there, and I think you had first year college at Donnelly College, and then you wanted to go into forestry. So we heard that Colorado State had a great forestry school, so you went there for 3 years. You graduated from there, and I think
you stayed in Kansas City until about 66.
It
Yeah.
seemed like there was always this 10-year period that we were one place and then transferred. And that. So we were transferred out to San Francisco, where the AT&T had transferred their headquarters from Kansas City out to San Francisco. And so you were, then you went into the Navy. I think after you had graduated from college, didn't you get a motorcycle and you went over?
Well, that was during.
Well, you went over there twice.
Twice. Yeah.
I think we went over to see Tom when he was in Europe, in Germany, and you had been over there before we went over, I'm sure.
Yeah.
At one time. Well, anyway.
How long did Dad work in San Francisco before he retired?
He worked about almost 2 years. We lived in Tiburon at that time. And knowing that Tom wanted to come back and establish his practice in Mill Valley, because he had that 1 year's internship at the Presidio, and that year that he had that internship, they lived in Mill Valley, and he always said, when I get out of the service, I'm going back and establish my practice in Mill Valley. So being that we were transferred out there, we thought, well, why not? We might as well retire, because John was going to retire within 2 years. So we started looking around for property, and that's how we found our present place in Santa Rosa.
Was that a lot of fun for you building that house?
Oh yes, it was our first real home, the one we call our own.
Yeah.
The other house, somebody had lived in it, and of course we fixed it up, and the house that we lived in, that we bought in Mission, Kansas, had been lived in, but this was our very own, and we really enjoyed that. And let's see now. You went. I can't remember when you went into the service. Went into training down in Pensacola.
Yeah.
I can't remember the
Well,
year
it was,
that was.
yeah, February 10th, 1966, and so
That was the same year that we were transferred out there.
I basically left you in Kansas City, and then you shortly thereafter transferred out to San Francisco.
Yeah.
How long did it take you and Dad to build that house?
Well, we went after John retired. We went to Omaha. That was on Memorial Day of 68. Memorial Day of 68, and then we stayed there until June the 17th. Then we came up to Santa Rosa and rented Anderson's place because they were going over to Europe and visit their son. It was also in the medical field. He was in the armed service, and they were going to stay over there a couple of months, and they asked if we would stay in their house, and we were really flabbergasted because one day after we had bought the property, we went up to Santa Rosa and was walking on our lot trying to plan where we wanted to place the house, and Joe Anderson come out and he said, how would you like to rent our house while we go over to Europe? And we were so taken back, we didn't know what to say. And so we said, well, we'll go back and we'll think about it, and then we'll call you. And the more we thought about it, we thought, well, what a great idea, because we had no place to stay. We were going to stay in a motel or something. And so we said yes, we'd come and rent their place. And I think we were in there for 2 months. And we had promised them that I think it was 3 months we were going to stay, that we'd stay the 3 months. And one day the Mermans came up after we'd been there 2 months and said, how would you like to rent our place while we go to Australia? And we said, well, we promised the Andersons that we would rent their place for that time. And so we said, well, we'll write the Andersons and see what they have to say about it. So they wrote back and said, sure, that's okay. So we were down to Mermans for a month, and I think there was just 1 week that we had to go into a motel before we could move into our house.
Yeah.
And I think it was about a week before Thanksgiving of 68 that we moved into our place. So that meant a lot of work, shrubbery and everything to plant, and when we planted it, why, here'd be a little bush here and that. And I told my friend, I said, this stuff's never going to grow. She said, in 5 years you're going to be cutting a lot of it back.
Yeah.
And sure enough.
Can we go back a little bit in your life? And do you remember anything about World War I from when you were a little girl?
I can, not too much. I can remember we was trying to knit a sweater or something that never got around to it. I can't remember too much about that, but I do remember World War II more.
Yeah.
It was on a Sunday afternoon. We were having Sunday dinner, and I promised Tom that I would take him down to see Santa Claus the next day. And we were sitting there eating our dinner, and then President Roosevelt's voice came over the radio and said that we had declared war on Japan because they had attacked Honolulu and the Hawaiian Islands. And I kept my promise, and I took Tom down to see Santa Claus, but I no more had my heart in Santa Claus or Christmas. I was just walking in a daze.
Yeah. Dad didn't go off to the service mainly because of his occupation and that he had a deferment.
Oh, he had a deferment on account of being in communication. He used to man a lot of those circuits of hearing Roosevelt talk and that. So he didn't have to go, which was a good thing because, of course, you want to be loyal in that. But he was doing something very important.
Do you remember anything about, I mean, the Depression? I mean, times started to get bad before you married Dad.
Oh, the 1931 Depression. We sailed through that. You know, a lot of the stock market just crashed, and people had a lot of money invested. They were jumping out of windows and committing suicide and everything. But we sailed through that. I think John's starting salary with AT&T was $43 a week.
My gosh.
And that was for a college graduate, an engineer. And we were paying $55 a month for our apartment. Well, when that crash came, John's salary went down to $37 a week. Our apartment rent went down from $55 to about $35. But we didn't suffer at all. We just sailed through. We had plenty to eat, got along fine, but you should see the bread lines in those days, and also people sleeping. In Chicago, there's a lower level where all the big trucks would go and unload their wares and that, and there, of course, naturally be the loading platform, and that would be full of men covered up with newspapers to try and keep warm. But we just got along great, and even saved some money out of it.
That's amazing, you know,
It
considering
was.
how bad times were back then.
So that was, I think, a time that when so many people were affected, we weren't. And John's graduation class, the last engineering class, was the last class of engineers that AT&T hired for a few years after that. So he just got in underneath the line there. So we were lucky.
Yeah, timing really is important sometimes.
It sure is.
Can we talk a little bit about your dad and your mom? You know, and the story of your dad is kind of interesting. His name wasn't Frank Vod
No.
when he started out. Can you tell that story?
Yes. Well, see, his dad migrated to the United States, and I don't know why he did, but maybe some of his relatives or friends had come over here. And when he came over, he came by himself, and then when he could get enough money, he'd send for the rest of his family. Well, he in fact, that land where Epley Airfield is in Omaha now was a lot of his dad's land in that. And his name was Swanson. And there was another Swanson in East Omaha that had a dairy too, and he was watering down his milk, and it was reflecting on my dad's father. So in order to get rid of that, he took the name of Bod, and it was spelled B-A-A-D, from a farm over in Denmark. So it was no longer Swanson, it became Bod, and that's what Dad took.
That was, I think, common over in Denmark too, for a person to take the name of the place they were working at.
Yeah, in a farm.
Yeah. And then how did, was your dad's name always Frank, or was it something else?
No, it was always Frank.
Oh,
Christian
it always.
Dad, or Bod, I should say,
Yeah.
because that's the way it's pronounced. He was in, and there was the Spanish-American War at that time, and he was inducted into that, but he wasn't on the firing line. He was some kind of I don't know what they called him, but they had to take care of the horses and the mules.
He was a mule skinner.
Is that what he was?
Yeah.
Well, after he got out of that war, I think the government had granted him a homestead plot, and that's where he uh, started his dairy business on that.
Oh, I see.
That's the way that happened. And I don't know how he met Mother or anything, but Mother she had, I think Grandma Johnson had lived in Rutland, Vermont, and she came from Norway. And how she ever came over, I don't know, and settled in Rutland, Vermont. And her husband, her first husband, which was Halverson, was crushed in a quarry. He worked in a quarry mine there. She had 3 children named Albert, Ernest, and Anna. And she was carrying Mother at the time that her husband was killed. Well, they're all buried in Rutland, Vermont. And how she migrated to Omaha, how she got there, I don't know. I never did find out, and I'm sorry, I never did inquire. She married a man by the name of Johnson. And then now whether Mother was born in Rutland, Vermont, or she was born in Omaha, I don't know. But anyway, she had these 3 more children, and she named them after her first 3 that died of black diphtheria. And their names were Albert, Ernest, and Anna. And of course, they're all gone now, and they're buried in Omaha. And so I thought that was always a kind of an interesting story, how she had 3 children by one man and then 3 more by another man. I never did meet any of my grandparents except Grandmother Johnson.
Well, is that right? All the grandparents were all gone.
Never had any grandparents except Grandma Johnson, and her husband had died when we were, before his kids were born, I think. So they were close, and we really had a lot of relationship with them. And the only uncle I ever knew was Dad's sister's husband, Lars. Lars Jensen. And they lived, a few blocks, well, maybe a couple of miles or so away from us. But we used to see a lot of them because they'd have these big dairy Danish parties. And the men would play cards and smoke their big cigars, and the women folk would be in the living room talking, and the kids running all over the house and things like that. So they had 5 boys. So those are really about the only cousins I ever grew up with. And so the rest of my cousins lived up in Washington, Oregon, and Alta and Gladys here in California.
Yeah. Was your grandfather Johnson, wasn't he killed on a horse that your dad had left behind when he went off to war, or something like that?
That was Dad's. That was Dad's. Let's see now. How was that? I think that was Dad's father.
Yeah.
That was killed. He liked horses, and I guess he was trying to tame a wild horse or something, and he threw him up in the air, and he came down on the funnel. What they call that funnel?
I'm not sure.
That thing that sticks up on the saddle. So he was killed.
So that was Grandfather Johnson, right?
That was
Oh, that was
Dad's father.
Dad's father.
Yeah.
Avad. That's right. That's right.
And Dad had 5 sisters, and he was the only boy. Of course, now they're all gone, but a lot of them had longevity. There's Dad that lived almost to be 100. His one sister in Oregon lived to be close to 100, and then Aunt Anna over in Omaha lived to be 97.
Wow.
So I think there's longevity in the family. So I'd say all that are the most highlights, but there's one thing I did forget to say, that Mom and Dad had twins. There were 7 of us children, but they lived to be just 8, 9 months old. They had same type of a stomach disease that you had, that they call it celiac today, but it's a bacteria that gets in the milk when it's not chilled enough. And in those days they call it cholera infantum, and now they call it celiac. So I can remember going out to the graveyard. They had the funeral in our front room, and for a long time I couldn't stand the smell of roses because it reminded me of that funeral.
So you had two separate funerals then in your house?
Yeah, 2 separate. One we went to the cemetery in May, and then the other twin died a month later, so we went out there again. And we had these old horse-drawn carriages, funeral carriages, and us kids, we thought that was a lark. You know, we were still little, we'd hang our head out the window and swing it back and forth. It was a long ride way out to Evergreen Cemetery.
Yeah.
I can still remember that so plainly.
Can you remember your first ride in a car?
Yeah, I can remember when Dad brought that Ford home, and he didn't even take any driving lessons. He just got in and started to steer it, and I can remember sitting in that back seat with the door kind of open in case he went and did something, I could jump out.
How old were you then? Do you remember?
Oh golly, that I must have been pretty young, because I can still remember we had a buggy like in the musical Oklahoma with the Surrey with the fringe on top. We had that. I can remember still riding in that, and it wasn't long after that then the first Fords came out, but I can't remember what year that was. But and then when we'd go on picnics out in the country, you had, if it rained, you had to put on those isinglass window, you know, things to keep the rain out, and the country streets weren't paved. They were just had that gravel, and it was a dry Sunday or so. Why, oh, you'd just be choked with that stuff flying in your faces. But I can remember that a lot of times, and we had a lot of fun going out in that car. You could get a distance with the car that you couldn't get in a buggy. So
did you ever really get outside of Omaha until you married Dad, or were you pretty much just in that area?
No, mostly in Omaha. I can remember when John used to say when he went away to school down at Lincoln, all his relatives and that were down to the depot to see him off, and it's only 65 miles away.
Yeah, times have changed.
It sure has. And
well, how about an airplane? What was the first time you?
First time I was in an airplane was, I think when we went. Maybe it was when we went down to Kansas City to look.
So that would have been in '55.
Yeah. And then the second time when we were on a plane was when we went to Europe to see Tom.
Well, the ride to Kansas City I can remember was a piston-driven prop, and then when you went over to Europe, it was in the 707.
TWA.
Yeah. So,
but I sure wish when I was way up there in the sky and I looked down, I thought, oh, I'd give anything if I just had my feet on solid ground. But it wasn't bad. That was the first time I was in an airplane. After that, it didn't bother me.
Well, you really have longevity in your family because all of your brothers and sisters are still living. And what are their ages?
Well, Grace was the same age as John. She's born in September 19th, 1904. Then Alice came along. See, after Grace was born, Mother developed what they called a milk leg, and she was bedridden about 6 months. And, she had this infection in her legs that they had to string gauze in there and saw it back and forth to get rid of that, infection. So, Grace went and lived with my grandmother and my 2 uncles and aunt. And then it wasn't, well, I think Alice must have been born about 10 months later. So, well, with Mother in that weakened condition, and Grace, it would have been too much for Mother to have 2 little ones to take care of. So Grace just continued to live with my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And as the time went on, it was just kind of like a septic thing. But often I heard Mother and Dad say they wish they had taken Grace home because she grew up not sharing with others and that. And she became quite selfish because she was just doted on.
Right.
They had no children. She was just like a little princess to them. And, but that's the way it was, and I don't know whether Grandma would give Grace up without a legal battle because they became very attached to her.
What was the first car that you and Dad ever had?
Olds.
Yeah, what year was that? Was that before the war?
It must have been, it was a black Olds with red stripes on it, you know, around trimming.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was after Tom was born sometime, because I can still remember John driving that car home, and I was so elated to think we had a car to get around in. And let's see, I think there was another highlight in my young life is when the same year Otto and Bus came down with, first Bus went to the hospital with pleural pneumonia, and they had to operate on his back to drain the infection off. And I can remember Otto coming in the house one day. He was 6 at that time, and I think Bus must have been about 9, probably 8. And he had been playing out in the snow and making these angels, you know how you do with your arms like that. And he said, I wish I could go to the hospital and go in an ambulance. And my golly, it wasn't a few days later than he did. He had developed spinal meningitis.
Wow.
And of course we had a family doctor by the name of Dr. Davis, and got him on the phone, and he came out and examined Jim and said he's got spinal meningitis, and he had a horse serum. If it hadn't been for that horse serum, Otto would either have died or been horribly crippled, because it was a bad thing. It seemed like every night you'd read about this one or that one dying from that. And of course he was taken to a contagious hospital where you couldn't see him because that was a contagious disease. So my one uncle would go down every day to see Jim and peek at him through a window, and then he'd come home and say, but there was a piece in the paper every night about Otto recovering from that. And I'll never forget the day that he came home in an ambulance wrapped in a blanket, and all of us were just scared to death to look at him because we were afraid that he was going to be crippled. But the only thing that was wrong with Otto was one of his eyes was crossed a little, and Dr. Davis gave him eye exercises like this, you know, to strengthen, and he came out fine from that.
My gosh.
But when we'd go to the hospital to see Bus, he was so homesick that he would just beg us to take him home on a streetcar. He'd say, Mom, you can carry my head, and Gertrude or Alice can carry my feet, and they won't know that you took me home. Well, you know, he was suffering more from homesickness than he was from his illness. And Dr. Davis said, we're going to take you home, because he could see that that bus wasn't making any improvement, and he drove home in his own car.
Oh.
So, and then Dad had gone out and bought a new suit because he thought that neither one of them was coming home again. But they did, and Alice and I was staying up to Grandma's because being that, you know, it was a contagious disease. But it is funny, and then later on, Alice had diphtheria. And she had a severe case of that, and I slept with her.
Is that contagious?
Slept right with,
Yeah.
very much so. That's
Yeah.
before they had all the inoculations and that. Very serious. And at that time, we didn't have inside plumbing. We had a well that we'd carry buckets in, and we'd had the same ladle to drink out of. We were drinking water out of that ladle when Otto had spinalgitis and Alice had scarlet fever. None of us got it. We must have had an excellent source of resistance by doing so, because golly, with my sleeping with Alice and drinking water out of that pail, I never got anything. And so those were trying years, but it seemed like we just survived.
Did you ever have any illness when you were growing up?
Measles and mumps, but that's all I can remember.
Yeah.
And so we had some serious illnesses in our family.
Yeah, you're perhaps the luckiest of everyone.
Yeah, I didn't come down with anything.
Yeah.
And of course, Mother, she died of cancer. And Dad had ulcers. And I think, had it not been for the fact that, well, he was being treated for ulcers by this one doctor we had, and it so happened this one time that he'd pass out, and this one time that he had one of those attacks, his doctor, it wasn't Dr. Davis at that time, I can't remember what this other doctor was, he couldn't come. He was out of town. He sent his assistant, and when he came out to examine Dad, he said, "You got a ruptured appendix." He was rolling on the floor. He was in such pain, and it was just nip and tuck with Dad for some time, because had the peritonitis spread, he would have been a goner. But they just were lucky to sort of keep it from spreading. And that's really saved his life, because he'd have died had it not been for that assistant of this doctor.
Yeah. Did your father pass away from a heart attack, was it?
I don't know what he passed away from.
Yeah,
I think he just died of old age. He didn't have any heart trouble.
Oh, he didn't?
No.
Oh.
He was he fell and he got his feet tangled up in a rag rug that Alice had in front of the front door. It's on to wipe your feet on, and he got his feet tangled. In fact, I think we were coming home from Davenport, Iowa for a visit, and she'd scrubbed the front porch and put that rag rug there, and he got his feet tangled up in it. I think he went out to get the paper or something, and Alice said she could see him just flying across the porch. We had that big bay window there, and he broke his hip there, and after that, he kind of went downhill. He had a pin put in his hip and that, and I don't know how he got, what was wrong with him, but he'd get these passing out spells and that. And the last time that we were home, he couldn't walk very well, and they carried him out in a armchair. And when he went through the front door, his flesh on his hand was just like tissue paper. Scraped the whole hand like that. So he had to go to the hospital, and Alice no longer could take care of him. because she was living in her house, and she had to go over and take care of Dad all the time, and it was kind of breaking down her health too. So from the hospital, he went out to the rest home in Gretna.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed to be quite happy out there. And I don't know, I guess it was just old age. He passed away. Otto had been up to see him, and it wasn't long after that that they called him and said that Dad had just passed away. You get to the point where your lungs and your heart just don't function, I guess.
Yeah.
He just passed away.
He's 98, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, that's a
Yeah.
fairly decent longevity.
Yes.
Well, Mom, it's been a lot of fun, you know, talking to you this past hour and listening to you reminisce about your life. And is there anything that I've missed that you'd like to say or talk about?
No, I truly can't say that. Maybe there's a couple things that I couldn't bring to mind at the present time. All I want to say to conclude this, looking back over my past life, my childhood, that I can truly say that I had a happy childhood and a wonderful, contented marriage, and had two fine sons that both John and I cherish and love very much. And I guess this is the finale of everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mom. It's been great.